Texas. If you're watching on social media, hit the share button. Let me know what you got going on today. We're going to be having some fun, and maybe it doesn't sound fun to everybody, but it's going to be a great time for you and me because we're going to learn a lot of really helpful information. I'm going to kick this on the FM, and here we go. Good morning. This is KHEA. It's 9:08. My name is Gardy. This is Kickstart, and I have some guests in studio with the Galveston Central Appraisal District. I'm going to let them introduce themselves and then share the role that they play here in Galveston County and how they may affect your life.
So my name is Nick Paris. I am an appraiser at the Appraisal District, and I oversee a lot of the commercial properties. And then I also kind of double as the communications point of contact for the Appraisal District. And I'll let Crystal introduce herself.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, I'm Crystal McKinney. I am the Deputy Chief Appraiser for Galveston Central Appraisal District. I kind of have my hand in all of it. So when it comes to administration, appraisal, a little bit of communications, Nick is our guru when it comes to that. So he's done a great job. And that's why we're here today is kind of launching our communications package and wanting to get information out to the public.
Yeah, so I noticed there's new social media pages. There's some new stuff going on. I get a lot of my information. I'm on social media a lot, probably a lot more than I should be, but I always use the excuses. It's part of my job, to be on there. But, there's a lot of people like me. That's just how you get your news. That's how you get your info. Is that what y'all found?
Yeah, so, particularly I was reading in the paper yesterday morning that millennials are the newest home buyers now. And so folks that are our age are out there buying houses, and they don't get a paper anymore. They don't tune into the local news. Half of them don't even have cable. So the way that they get their information is through Facebook, through social media. And so we found that to be a pretty effective way to get information out there. And besides that particular group, there's a lot of people that utilize Facebook to kind of get information, talk to their neighbors. And so I think that's a good way for us to connect with people and share some understanding that ultimately benefits the community.
Facebook and Instagram went down the other day, and it was a weird time. It's like I was out of habit checking it. Oh, let me go see what's going on. It's down for 6 hours, right?
Right. Yeah.
Is it ever going to come back? I saw rumors that it was deleted. The code is gone, right?
Wow.
But they brought it back. And so now we can broadcast to Facebook and everything else again, which is awesome. So the information, that's what's important. What is it that y'all do? If somebody is not familiar with what y'all do, how would you describe that to them?
So the Appraisal District is a political subdivision of the state of Texas. So we actually are not a county entity, and none of them are. Every single one is like this. They might have the county's name, like Harris County Appraisal District or Fort Bend Central Appraisal District or Galveston Central Appraisal District. But our direct job that we do is we appraise the properties in Galveston County for property tax purposes, so that the entities can assess a tax that thereby funds the entities to spend to pay teachers, for example, in the school district, or to fund city operations on roads and streets in a city. Those type of things are what our job is. Our values are used to fund those entities.
And I've seen a lot of this in the news, and it's some hot topic stuff right now because, the tax rate, I guess the city set the amount of taxes, where it's like I've seen it in Lamarck, like 55 cents, and people want it lower, and they say, well, it's the same. It's been that for 3 years, and what you need to do is go, talk to the people over there and see if you can get your stuff lowered. What kind of timelines are we looking at, and why? It's not necessarily finger pointing, but they work together, right?
It's two sides of the coin. So at the Appraisal District, what we do is we appraise your property. We don't assess, collect, or have anything to do necessarily with what it is we are tasked to do is to just appraise. So we don't have anything to do with taxes. But in theory, it's both sides of the coin. So you have the tax rate. So that creates your levy or what you're paying in taxes. So let's say market value goes up, Lamarck's tax rate stays the same, your taxes will increase because your market value increased. I think a lot of people don't understand kind of the whole...
Like the interaction between the two.
Right. So
Yeah.
Everybody's like appraisal district, appraisal district, when you also have a voice when it comes to your taxes, and it sounds like some people are using that, and that's a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
But at the appraisal district, our job is just to look at market data and to come up with, using statistical analysis, come up with the market value for your property.
What does that look like? What does that look like? Because sometimes you'll see like, hey, we live in the same neighborhood. This person got there, protested theirs. It's lowered. And how does that work?
So mass appraisal is is where you appraise a universe of properties. So during the protest process, when you do protest your property, you come in and we get to look at a more one-on-one scenario with your property, kind of like Nick said earlier, with like a fee appraisal type approach, where we're looking at sales and comparing them directly to your home, adjusting those properties to be just like yours. And it may indicate that the mass appraisal got your value too high, and then we can lower that. Also, ways you can lower your property during the protest process would be like if you have condition issues, we don't go inside the homes. So if you have stuff going inside your home, bring that in, and that's another way that your value can be reduced by showing us that your property isn't in the condition that we say it is. You want to add to that?
Yeah, I think the easiest way to explain it is it's a bell curve, just like a teacher gives a curve on a test. And I know everybody's probably taken a test in their life, or there's a lot of teachers out there too. But we're looking at, like in a simple situation, a house that we had on the roll for $100,000, it may sell for $110,000. That's telling us we need to make a 10% adjustment. We're going to group properties together, based on their characteristics and what we're defining to be a neighborhood. It may not actually be a neighborhood per se, or it could be a section of an existing neighborhood, but we group those properties together. We look at the sales that occurred, and we apply a median level of adjustment to everybody's property. And that's not necessarily going to fit everybody's property exactly. I mean, that's like exactly the way a test works. If you really bomb the test, you can still get a curve and you'll still have an F. I mean, that's just the way it works. So there could be people that are well below their purchase price still, and there could be people that are higher than their purchase price. And the same thing's going to happen for these properties that are being appraised that haven't sold. At the end of the day, we're trying to shoot a moving target. I mean, it's a hard thing to do, to guess what something might sell for. And we do the best we can looking at all the data and trying to analyze it. But you do end up with situations where if the sales are correlated to, let's say, 1,000 to 1,500 square feet, the people in that area, their adjustment's probably going to fit them. Mm-hmm. But outside of that, larger or smaller, they're going to be the ones that receive reductions or get adjustments to their property. And so when you're comparing sort of with your neighbor, yeah, it is possible to have two different people have two different results in the same year with their protest.
Yes. How has COVID, 2020, people being out of work and, some different things, how has that affected, the appraisal process? Has it? And then even that human element. So if people go and protest and you're like, hey, here's what I'm dealing with. I'm out of work, hospital bills, these other things. I'm either going to lose my house. Does that ever play a factor as well?
It doesn't. And that's the hardest part, is that you have these property owners, the citizens that come in and they tell you, I've been out of work since, 6 months and I'm going to lose my house. We can't play the human element on that. We still have a job to do as an appraiser. So you have to kind of take the emotion out of it. And that's hard to do when you're talking to somebody face to face, is know that you can't give them any kind of break or benefit due to their situation. And I'd have to say that's probably for me throughout my career, that's the hardest part. Or you have the elderly lady that comes in and just lost her husband and she doesn't know how to do all this and she's very confused. And that's hard to sit down with a property owner and kind of watch them struggle. And then that's another reason kind of leading into, that's why we want to get information out so that everybody understands what it is that we do and why that we do it, and that those specific things don't play a part in your appraisal.
Okay. So this year, housing it seems like the prices is going up, and I'm guessing that's from effects of just like production of houses and lumber and all these things like car parts and just everything. It's not just houses, but the prices of houses they're selling for a lot more. I guess why, and how has that affected people's taxes?
Well, I think a lot of it is, the government's basically giving away free money at this point with low interest rates, and I think that drives a lot of it. So that housing becomes more affordable. I think people also Galveston County, I want to think is, last time I looked at it, is the 5th or 6th fastest growing county in Texas. There's 254 of them. And the Houston area has the majority of them. Fort Bend, I think, is number 1 in growth. And so there's just a lot of people wanting to get out of the city. And I think with all the remote stuff that's going on, people can. I mean, they can come live in League City or come live in Santa Fe or come live in Dickinson and still have their job in Houston. And it's a lot easier if I only have to go to work 3 days a week. That drive to Houston's not as bad because I can work remote. And so with the low interest rates, like I say, houses have become more affordable and people are willing to buy. And at this point now, I mean, there's houses out there that sit on the market for 36 hours and they have 5-6 offers and they're all over ask and all sorts of different financing. And so it's really a seller's market right now. And unfortunately, that doesn't, while that's good for the average property owner, because they could probably sell their house for more than they could last year, that the converse of that is that the inverse of that is that the value is going to go up, and that means you're going to pay more in taxes. If the cities are doing just like Crystal said, even if they keep the rate exactly the same, if your value increases and the rate stays exactly the same, the city's going to collect more money and every property owner is going to pay more tax. So that's kind of where the rubber meets the road on that.
And also, I guess we had talked about this before we went on air, but people are moving from other states.
Yes.
Where they were out of work or they sell, what's going on there as well?
So I've seen a lot of this, and I've actually had a lot of property owners that have come in this year that were recent purchases that did come from a different state. And so the scenario I see the most is wherever the state they lived in before, they were able to sell their 3-bedroom home for, let's just say, $1 million. They come into Texas and you can buy a 3-bedroom home for $250,000. Well, man, that's a steal. So then they're walking in and, houses are getting offers over ask. They're willing to put so much more money towards it and paying cash. So now you're driving up the market. So what used to sell for $250,000 on a normal year is now selling for, in some areas, $300,000, $350,000
Right.
because that's what they're willing to pay for it. So that's the definition of market value, is a willing buyer and a willing seller. So once you establish that and you've contracted with a price, that becomes what the property is worth. And so when people come in and they're paying over ask, or they're paying in cash well above what, I was surprised what the properties are going for, what the increase in the market value is.
So that drives up
It becomes the standard.
assessment.
Right. So everybody knows, well, most people know when you buy a home, you have to have a fee appraisal done. So the fee appraiser goes out and he looks at properties around that have sold like yours and comes up with the value. And if you're getting a mortgage, that's what the mortgage is, based on, is it has to be worth at least what you're trying to purchase it for. So with these properties, this happens over and over and over, where they're paying well over ask, or they're coming in with all this cash and willing to pay just about anything for a property. That becomes the standard, that becomes the market. So now when you look at properties, again, what used to sell for $250,000 is now worth $350,000 because people are willing to buy it for that.
Mm-hmm. So earlier, Nick, you mentioned, you get asked, and by friends when they find out what you do for a living, and you work for the county, Galveston County Appraisal District, right? And you said you asked them a question like, hey, what was that question? That was a good story.
So it basically, when you ask people, almost everybody knows to protest their property taxes, but it was interesting to me to talk to them and ask, of those of you that protested your taxes, who voted in the last election or voted for a bond? And I was specific, and I don't mean to vote for the mayor or for president. I mean just the general elections that go on. They're not always in November. It's when somebody wants to spend money on something, they have to put it to the voters. And when's the last time that you voted in that? And maybe 20% of the people that actually protested, and in my little group that I sampled, actually went and voted in one of those elections. And it's surprising because, that has equal weight to protesting your property taxes, because the value times the levy is the value times the rate gives you the levy. So if you can reduce the rate in the same way you can reduce the value, you're going to save money. But there's not that push on that side either. We get probably, what do you think, 60, 70,000 protested a year?
This year we had 61,900 protests.
Out of how many? What's the total?
We have 197,000.
Just under 200,000 parcels.
Yeah.
So, but I think, and I don't have the data, but I bet if you looked at you broke that down by area, you would see a kind of the same trend. Probably in like League City, let's say, probably 20% of the people voted in a bond election in League City or any one of these localities. We could break that data down and look at it. But that's really the thing is, you get a voice in how the money is spent as well. And that voice with the city is just as important as coming down and getting the value side straight on it as well.
So it was, I guess, about 61,000 people protested out of about 200,000, but everybody has that opportunity to protest if they want, right?
Right. So we send notices out usually at the beginning of April of every year if your property value increased. That's got a protest form in it. And so that's usually the initial start of the protest season. People will get that notice. They'll send in that protest. But you don't have to get a notice to protest. You can protest your property every year, whether the value goes up, goes down, stays the same. You have the right to do that. So,
is there ever anything bad that can happen from protesting? It's like, well, actually, that was a mistake. We can, it's lower than it should be.
No, they've changed that law. It used to be that you could go to the appraisal review board and the board could increase the value of a property. And that has happened, and they've changed the law now where the board can't do that. So even if you go before the appraisal review board, if the district doesn't recommend a decrease in value in our informal, you can go before the board, and you really have no risk because the panel's going to hear the evidence, and then they're going to make a decision, and they're not able to reduce the value or increase the value above the notice value. So if it's a $100,000 property, the district's not offering any decrease. You go before the board and they still say it's $100,000. Well, you didn't lose anything. You went through the process as pretty much as far as you could without spending any money, and you didn't risk anything.
Okay, so I got two questions about that. So who makes up this board that is able to kind of help you or just double check?
So the ARB is they're appointed by the district judge, and most often they're retirees. And the reason why that is because it requires you to be available in the summer from 8 to 5, Monday through Friday. And you almost have to sort of work a regular 8 to 5 job for a few months. And the application process for that is actually open right now, and you can find the application on our website. And we've posted the information to it around at all the local cities and down at the courthouse and stuff. So we're looking to get a larger number of ARB members so that way we can be more flexible with our scheduling. In the past, we've kind of had the number that we needed and a couple of alternates, and that sort of forced everybody to have to work 8 to 5. But the more people that we can have a pool from, for example, HCAT has like 2 times as many board members as they actually need. And so they're able to go in, and if somebody wants a time off, has a baseball game for their grandson or daughter and wants to go see it, they can go down there and do it, and they can bring somebody else in. And so we're only able to do that if we can get people to apply. But to answer your question, they're citizens of Galveston County. You have to own a property in Galveston County. You can't have delinquent taxes. Just basically have to apply, and the judge will interview you and either assign to the board or not assign you to the board. And so you're there then with I think it's 8 hours of training now that they've got down to one day. You're there, and you basically act sort of as the jury is the way to think of it, because the district's going to present their side, a property owner is going to present their side, and you sort of weigh out the argument and fact and make a determination according to the law. So
yeah. And you can go to galvestoncad.org. That's the website, right?
Yes, sir.
I was there earlier, and I was looking. I saw, and it's one of the first things. You just barely scroll down, and it's right there saying, "Hey, we're looking for people. It's open right now."
Right.
Okay. So if you're going to go through that process of protesting, what kind of materials or what kind of information can you give people that may be beneficial to them to prove their case?
So I'll take market. Overvalued, and you take uniform and equal.
Okay.
Let's do that. So if you feel like your value of your house is too high because of sales inside the area, you want to find sales that are like yours. Find homes that have sold, because the really funny thing about appraisal is we don't have every sale that happened in the market. Texas is a non-disclosure state. So you may have information that we don't have. We only have the information that we're given by different entities or people. So you'll come in on market value. Market value has to do with sales and with condition of your home. So the condition of your home affects the market value. So if you have condition issues, you're going to want to bring in pictures. Don't show me the brand new, travertine floors that you may have. Show me where the foundation is messed up and you have to fix that. Or anything that's showing that your house is in disrepair, is not ready for sale. Pictures are great. Estimates are better. So if you have estimates within the year that you're protesting, bringing those in as another professional's opinion of how much it's going to cost to remedy your property. Those are important, and they affect the market value. So if you protest on that, you'll be able to come in and show us that, and we'll be able to lower the appraisal based on the information that you give us.
Yeah, and that's a weird thing. We were talking about this before we went on air, because you want your house to be worth, a good value. It's an investment. You want it to be a good investment, but then whenever it comes to the appraisal district, you want it to be low so the taxes you won't be paying on that high investment or whatever,
Right.
So.
I mean, it's a weird.
Yeah, and I think too, something on the market, not to steal your.
Oh, okay.
Your
Now he's
topic
taking
here,
my topic over here.
But a lot of times we get CMAs or reports from realtors, and it's not that it's good data, or not good data rather, but we look at it differently than a realtor does. And so I know people buy houses off. I'm going to pay $100 a square foot, but while we can take our value down to a price per square foot, we can't compare houses that way. It's interesting that it works just like, the way Costco and Walmart and these guys work. When you're buying something at a scale, so houses are the same way, land's the same way. If you're buying a small plot of land or a small house, you're going to pay more per square foot than you are to buy a large house. And it's the same way. You go buy 12 water bottles at HEB, you may pay $1 a bottle. But you go to Costco, right, their stick is that they're going to sell you 48 water bottles. You really don't probably need 48 water bottles. But you're going to pay maybe 75 cents a bottle. And so we get that comparison a lot sometimes. It's like the person that at $1 per bottle, let's say, says, oh, this house sold for, or this property sold for 75 cents or whatever it is. And we can't look at it that way. We have to adjust the differences between the properties. And that sort of is a good segue into uniform and equal, because that's a very specific type of argument. And uniform and equal is, I deal with that a lot with a lot of the commercial property, but it essentially says the district is not assessing my property equally with somebody else. And so if you and I have similar houses, the value should be similar. And similar doesn't necessarily mean the exact same value. We have to adjust for the differences between the properties. The tax code requires that adjustments be made for the differences and that you take it on a median. And then they've actually, in the law, added that the adjustments have to be in line with acceptable appraisal standards. So it's not just saying this person has a pool, so I've taken the value of the pool out. We have to equalize the differences between the properties. And so that's somewhat hard for a property owner to do, because you have to have a lot of data. And so on our end, by way of the way we have to appraise these properties, we're able to identify the specific areas in each property, the living areas on different floors, for example, the porches and that kind of thing. And so we can really take it to the nth degree. But what people can do is they can, number one, request an evidence package from us on any property. The law requires that we provide you with an evidence packet if you request it. So all you have to do is ask us for the evidence packet. We'll provide you with the sales and the uniform and equal data that we would be using for your protest. And the other thing, too, is that you have to protest the things that you're wanting to disagree about. So if you only check market, we're not going to – the board cannot hear a protest on uniform and equal. The code specifically would say that you're not entitled to a determination from the board on an item you didn't protest. So if you're unsure, it's better to check all the boxes, every single one of them, because you can always withdraw, but you can't add a protest. So once you've passed that May 15th deadline to file a protest, you can't go back and say, well, I want to add uniform and equal to my protest. You can always say, oh, I don't want to do that, the market value portion over to the uniform and equal. But on that, the uniform and equal is harder for property owners to collect data on. I would say the better thing to do is people, drive by these houses in their neighborhood every day. I know in the neighborhood I grew up with, I can think offhand, driving down those streets, for 25 years, of the exact same floor plans where they are on the way to, through the neighborhood. Jot those addresses down. Bring them to us. I mean, we can look and see what those properties are appraised at in terms of uniform and equal. That's going to be your best option there, because the amount of data and stuff that's going to be required is just going to you're going to have a time factor there where it's going to cost you a lot more time than probably the result that's going to come out. And this year, everybody's going to get an informal with the way they've changed the law that's required now that everybody gets an informal. We were already doing that, but so you'll have an opportunity to sit down and talk to us. And so You can basically take our feedback and you'll know sort of our view on it, and you'll be able to come to the board sort of with a game plan in mind already, if that's the option you pursue.
So, earlier you said something like, hey, we don't collect the taxes. We just assess it. Those taxes, can we remind people, I guess, where do they go exactly? And then I wanted to ask you guys after that, have we figured out where the taxes go, do y'all ever see a way that they could get rid of property taxes? So first, I guess, where do the taxes go? Because y'all don't collect them.
The taxes go to the entities. So the various, like school district, for example, they're going to collect money to operate the school district, pay teachers, pay principals, pay janitors, build new schools, that kind of thing. Cities, the same kind of thing. They got to pay their city staff. They got to pay the police officers, the firefighters, that kind of thing, and roads. And so each one of these entities has a specific purpose that it serves in your community. And so they obviously need money to do their job. And I guess what it comes down to is, it's your money at the end of the day. So you're the one, the property owners are the one giving the cities the money, and ultimately you control how it's spent, because if you don't like the way that it's spent, or you want it to be spent differently, you have an opportunity to voice that concern to property, or to the city, to the school district in those meetings. And they go on usually in the summertime, because in Texas, there are some exceptions, but most government entities or public entities run on a fiscal year that starts September 1st. So they have to have their budget already figured out. And the way that the process works is that we do our value first, and then they get to do their budget from there. So, depending on how, I don't think anybody likes paying taxes. Me personally, I kind of think it's a little bit backwards, because there's not, you kind of get to know what the value is before you have to determine what you're going to spend. I kind of think maybe they should be done at the same time. Just my own opinion, but that's basically where the money's going, and that's where you have a voice. And as far as eliminating property taxes, I think that would be hard, because Texas is structured on not having an income tax. And I think when you look at states that do have income taxes, I think it's somewhat of a wash. But the good thing is, with a property tax, if there is a good thing with taxes, is that money's staying local for the most part. Now, the state does have a hand with Robin Hood and dispersing funds around the state with school funding, but with a state income tax, all that money is going to the state to be distributed to everybody. So I think it's better in the sense that you're getting local control over where the money's spent. What do you think?
Yeah, so I just wanted to add to that. They came out with the Truth in Taxation website. This is a really neat tool that I think helps property owners understand. There's actually a link on it on our webpage. It's a tab at the top. It says Truth in Taxation. So it actually breaks down. You can put your property ID in there, and it will tell you every taxing entity that collects for you, that imposes a tax. It'll show you a pie chart that tells you how much of your taxes are being allocated, are being charged, or how much of your levy in total.
What the breakup is between. Yeah.
So it shows you, like, the school has the biggest chunk of the pie. And then you have the county that has, it breaks it down for you. It also gives you contact information for all the different taxing entities. It gives you the tax rate hearings where they go and they adopt the tax rate. That's a public hearing. They put the information on that Truth in Taxation website. So if you wanted to have a voice, that information is there, and it can show you where each one is having their meeting, what time. They upload documentation, which I think is really neat. I think everybody's trying to gear towards that transparency. So the Truth in Taxation, if you wanted to have a voice on that end as well, is a great source for information.
What are some of the misconceptions that people have about what y'all do? Or they hear the name, the GCAD. What are some things that people it's just straight up wrong or partly wrong?
I'm gonna say something kind of jokingly, but most people, I think we work off commission.
Yeah, I get that a lot.
That it's useful for us to keep the values high, buddy. We don't care. Your property being high or low doesn't matter. I just want it to be right. As an appraiser, I just want your market value to be correct. So a lot of people will come in and they think that our job is to increase the value because one of the tax entities need more money. That's not how that works.
Yeah, that happens a lot. Yeah, too. Well, that somebody wants to build a new football stadium or something, and I think the assumption is that there's a phone call made to the appraisal district and said, hey, I need money for this, so I need you to raise our value.
Raise the assessment.
Right.
Number one,
Yeah, that's not.
I mean, you can't. That conversation is banned by law. They can't call us and ask us that kind of thing. But that happens a lot. Or there's some type of hot button issue. Somehow we always get roped into it as being the funding source, and we don't have anything to do with the taxes portion of it at all. Really, the only contact we have with the taxing entities are through their elected representatives. So our board of directors, which each entity gets an allotted amount of votes, gets to appoint people to the board, and they only get to do a couple of things. They get to manage our budget, they get to hire and fire the chief appraiser, and a handful of other sort of administrative tasks. But even they cannot talk to the chief appraiser directly about a value.
Right.
Our direct oversight is not at the county; it's with the state. And they play a big role in this process as well, because they're auditing our records. We talked about the 95 to 105% that we have to be within market value. It's somewhat easy to do on residential property, but when you get to commercial property, there's no sales to compare with most of the time.
Yeah.
They're having their own appraisers value it and comparing it with our values. And so that's sort of a hot button issue that I think people don't know about really right now. Is it's more hot button for the appraisal districts, because it's interesting. Actually, I think the comptroller's office, their property tax assistance division, had a graph, and they showed that the exponential growth of people that are failing their studies. And I don't know so much if that's due to the appraisal districts or sort of where that burden falls on, but that is a driving factor as well, because that's our direct oversight on the value. It's not to a city, it's not to the county judge, it's not to our board of directors, it's to the state. And ultimately, why do they play a role? So somebody has to sort of audit the appraisal district, and so I think it's fine that the comptroller does that, but it's also where they get to exert influence into the process, because they ultimately control the biggest part of your tax bill, which is school funding. They get to take in, or they don't directly control your school funding, but they get to take, let's say, from Galveston ISD and distribute it to McAllen ISD, and that whole Robin Hood deal is certainly a hot button issue, and I think people will recognize that. But that's sort of the process. Is the state does pressure a little bit on the value, and there are cases that where our values were low relative to what they're actually worth in commercial property. I think there's points where they're exactly right, but I also think there's points where they're exactly wrong too. So I think
and there's an appeals process for that.
Yeah, I mean.
A lot of people don't understand, like this is our, what we call our checks and balances, is the property value study and the map study. So we get the property value study on the odd years. If we fail a district, then we get it the next year. So it could be that we have the property value study 3 years in a row. Maps are on the even years. But going back to common misconceptions, oh man, I thought about it and then I got off topic. This is another big one. That it's a negotiation. So
the best I can do.
This
is the best I can do.
So I think a lot of people come in to exactly. I tell people all the time, if I sold used cars, I'd make more money. I work for the government, so let's just start there. But with the protest prop, it's not a haggle. Like, can you give me another $1,000? We have to appraise the property, so the data has to support the value. So it's not that you come in and you're like, hey, I want $15,000 more off, and you kind of reduce it down like. With a used car, like, okay, I'm going to buy, I only got $7,500 off. That's not how the protest process works either. And I think people come in kind of with a misconception sometimes that it is a negotiation. It's not. It's based on the facts that you bring to the table and the data that I can use to support that. So
that's good.
I think people would be surprised too how the amount of folks that come to protest, but they don't bring us anything.
Yeah.
That's a big thing. And you mentioned that, but that really is, that's a big thing.
You got to come prepared, do some homework.
I mean, even if it's just bringing us pictures, that's better than nothing. I mean, if you don't have the time to pull the market data or jot down houses that are similar to yours, that's fine. But bring us information on your property, because I think that's a big frustration point is, my house isn't as nice as these properties. Well, in talking about working with the comptroller, we basically do the same process that a property owner does when we have a disagreement. We have to go to the comptroller and say, this is the information on this property. We're essentially protesting in the same way that a property owner is. And so in order for us to be able to help you, it's like Crystal always says all the time, help me help you. We've got to have that data so that when the comptroller questions us on it, we can do the same thing and say, no, here's the specifics on this particular property. And, you know, it's got foundation, whatever it is, it's got foundation issues, it's got this, it's got that. And we can explain to them why we have it valued the way we do. And it really mirrors the same thing that a property owner does.
Okay, so if there was about 200,000 total, like I guess homesteads, right, and about 60,000 of them protested, do y'all know the rate of the people that actually had theirs lowered or it was changed?
So I actually did a little bit of a statistical analysis in our board meeting yesterday. We had our board of directors meeting once a month, and in that I give a brief little overview of what's going on the appraisal side of the appraisal district. So not specifically to the question you asked, but I do have some data that I put together. We settled 72.5% of the properties. We agreed, whether that was a lower or they agreed to leave the value the same. 72.5% of the protests were done informally, not before a board, and agreed by the property owner. That's pretty. I mean, I'm really proud of our.
Yeah, I mean we'd obviously loved for it to be 100%, but
right.
That's not realistic. But
that sounds good.
It's a good number.
Yeah, so they were like, hey, you know what, this is good. It's either lowered or y'all came back with the evidence and showed them where they agreed.
And it's a sign off. So they sign a piece of paper that's a final agreement and a waiver of protest where they agree to whatever the value is.
Okay.
Not necessarily that they have to love it, but that they've agreed to not go further. So 72.5%, I mean, I feel like we're educating and people are bringing us information. We're able to settle it at the first step of the protest process informally.
Okay. That's what, my next question was going to be, if it ever got to a rate, it's like, man, we are dropping a lot of these. Maybe we should relook at the process. If it gets to a certain rate, then we need to maybe change a little or tweak the way that we go about assessing these.
So we do the sales ratio every year. So we look at sales every year, and it's not necessarily like throughout the season we're like, oh, we lowered too many, we can't lower anymore. It doesn't work like that. Again, we just have to have the data match what is happening in the market and the value to match that.
Okay. Cool. Okay, so one of my final things, I just want to get to some common questions. What are some things that people ask you guys, regularly, and it's just good information to get out there?
Oh man, what do you?
There's a lot of them.
I know. I can't.
And now that you're on the spot, you feel like you can't.
Yeah, no, I can't think of all of them. But
common questions is, I guess how what do I need to bring to a protest hearing? I mean, that's pretty common. They also will ask us about taxes, and again, the appraisal district does not assess or collect taxes.
Right.
Trying to think.
That gets a lot of it. A lot of it's sort of centers
Nick,
around property.
Earlier you said protest your property taxes. No, you protest your property appraisal. So that's a big misconception and a question that we get a lot of the time. You're protesting your appraisal, not the taxes.
Difference between what you're being assessed and your market value. That's a big one.
Yeah.
So on a homestead exemption, the state law caps the increase at 10%. So going back to this $100,000 property, if the district increases the value from 100 to 135, you're going to be capped at 110%. The district doesn't deal with that, 110%, 110,000. The district doesn't deal with that 110 number. We deal with the market value at 135.
Right.
So sometimes we get through the whole discussion, and the end result is we can reduce the value from 135,000 to 115,000. And we go to do that, and it's like, well, but you didn't reduce what I'm paying in taxes at all. And that's something that I think that we need to work on explaining better, because we don't affect that 110. The only way you're going to see a reduction in that value is if the value is reduced, say, back down to 100,000. Then that value would come down. But so long as that assessed value is at a substantially lesser level than the market value, even if the district reduces the value, if it doesn't go below that threshold, it's not gonna. You're not going to see a reduction sort of in the amount that you were initially kind of noticed at.
Yeah, I think another question is exemptions. A lot of people don't understand or don't know about certain exemptions, and let's get some information out to the public real quick. Homestead is an exemption that if that is your primary residence, you want to make sure that you have a homestead on that property. You have the over 65 exemption. So that's once you turn 65, you get an exemption. So there's a really common misconception about the over 65 is that your market value will freeze. That's not correct. What you pay to your levy that you pay to certain entities freezes, and they have to elect that exemption to
the amount
offer
you're
it.
cutting the check for, I think, is what I usually. But you're exactly right. So it's not the levy. It's not the rate, and it's not the value. It's what you're cutting that check for. So if you're paying $1,000 in taxes to Clear Creek ISD the year you turn 65, that's what freezes the $1,000, and it's not really a freeze; it's a ceiling. If something catastrophic happened and the levy was reduced below that $1,000, you can pay less than that.
Yeah, you pay under, you can't pay over.
Right. So it hits that ceiling and won't go any more than that. So that's a common misconception.
Yeah.
I think a lot, or question we get asked a lot is sort of how that works.
And it could be that somebody doesn't pay taxes at all because their exemptions, when they have the over 65 and the homestead, their exemptions are more than their home is worth. So there could be these very small. It's not very typical, but we see that. Another exemption I just want to go over really quickly is the disabled veterans or disabled person exemption. If you have any of these things going on, come by the office and let's talk about filling out an application to get the exemption. We want people to know about this stuff because it does reduce the burden of the taxes later on because the exemptions take off value from the market value. So like for the homestead, you get $25,000 off the school. Their taxable value minus $25,000 now becomes your help me here.
Oh, your I can't. Your assessed value.
Yes, so that becomes what you pay taxes on. You also have like 100% disabled veteran.
And there's surviving spouse exemptions also,
Right.
so sometimes that gets missed as well.
Okay.
It's just
But
a good
these are all
information to have.
these are all kind of things that we're hoping to cover in our appraisal and appeal courses that we're going to do, which is we're going to start in the spring with getting out and kind of running through sort of the things we've talked about here with you.
Are those in person?
We can do them in person and we can do them in virtual. Our goal is to try to do them in person, but obviously,
Got to go with the flow.
right. Yeah, it's kind of up in the air, but that's the goal. But we're also working to get those live streamed as well, so that way, if you can't make it for whatever reason, that you can still access the information because it's important.
How often are those going to be? Is it going to be like an ongoing course or like once every so often?
Our goal is to try to do them. I mean, ultimately, the focus on us is usually in the springtime because that's when everybody starts to get back into taxes, both with the federal government and with the appraisal district, and figuring out their value, just by nature of that's the way the calendar is structured. So we're looking to start doing those in January, February, March, leading up to April. We get really busy between end of March and August, and so we want to kind of get all that information out ahead of time. So when people get their value notice in the mail, they already have the tools in their tool belt ready to go to get their stuff together to come in and protest. And that's the thing is it's not. I don't want to give the wrong idea. It's not a let me teach you how to protest your property value, because that's not our goal.
Right.
Ultimately, the public needs to have an understanding of how the property is valued to begin to know if it's valued incorrectly. I think the rush to judgment all the time is my property is valued incorrectly. Just as soon as I get the notice, it's valued incorrectly, and that's not always the case. As a lot of people can probably relate. There's a lot of values we didn't change this year. So we want to give them we want to give people the tools to be able to go in and look at their value, know how we determined it, look at the analysis from the area, and kind of get a good idea of how their value is valued and what it's at, and is that a good value or is it not a good value? Certainly we encourage everybody to protest if they have an issue, but the goal is just for everybody to be able to look at it and know what they're looking at, understand, and sort of make that decision for themselves on protesting.
If somebody wants to access any kind of tools or information about that now or learn more, is there stuff available online or at the office?
So we have a couple of different videos on our website that kind of breaks down what the appraisal district does. The comptroller's website is a wealth of information when it comes to how to protest, why the rights and responsibilities of the property owner. I mean, there's a lot of good information under there, under the PTAD division.
The comptroller, on PTAD, they give you, which is, you can just navigate to the comptroller's website, and then they have a whole section for property tax and that'll sort of give you the places to look for various different code sections and things if you're interested in that kind of stuff, and also some general knowledge. But we're working right now to revamp our website. We've kind of changed providers there, so that'll be something that's coming in the future. And our goal there is to get a lot more information out. And we just kind of started doing all this, communications and social media. So right now there's not a lot out there, but we're getting it out there slowly. Mm-hmm. We also established a communications specific email address, so you can reach the communications staff, myself, Crystal, just by emailing that. And it's really simple to remember. It's just communications@galvestoncad.org, and you can use that. Actually, we have a meeting with the Seacrest HOA at their HOA meeting next week, and you can request us. We're happy to come to your HOA meetings, to Rotary Club, to whatever meeting's going on. We're happy to show up. We can give a presentation. We can answer questions. Just sit there and smile. I don't know. Whatever.
It sounds kind of reading rainbow, but the more you know.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, it's not about the whole communication package as a whole, and what we're doing now is not to influence anybody's opinion of the appraisal district. It's strictly to get out knowledge to the public and to the property owners, because I feel like a lot of people don't understand what it is that we do, and if they do, maybe they don't understand it fully. And there's a service we could provide there. Nobody likes paying taxes. And we're part of that two-sided coin. We're not the taxing entity, but yet we are the appraisal district. Those two things together equal your tax levy. So, but the more you know, the better prepared you are, and the transparency part of it. Like, we want you to know what it is we do.
I feel like talking about common misconceptions and questions that are asked, it's a lot about, I think people have this idea that we're sort of locked in this dark room figuring out how to screw everybody over every year, and that's not what happens. We really are just trying to get a reasonable value on folks' property, and it's really a hard job. It might sound easy, but you start to get into some of these areas that are not alike, and looking at these sales prices like Crystal's talking about that are through the roof, and it's just like you can just see the writing on the wall. It's frustrating at times. And we're property owners too, so it's not like our values don't.
Mine goes up every year.
Yeah.
So I mean,
do y'all ever protest?
Yes, I do, every single year. So what Nick was talking about earlier is actually kind of the scenario I have in my neighborhood. So I have several homes that sold in my neighborhood that are much smaller. I have a 3,000 square foot house. These houses were 1,400 to 1,600 square feet. They needed to increase because those homes are selling for much more than they used to. But what happens is, and it's without going into too much detail and confusing everyone, it's called a super adequacy. So I have one of the bigger houses in my neighborhood, and what happens in mass appraisal, I tell people all the time, mass appraisal isn't perfect. It's a start. It's a universe of properties. Then we go through and can look at things one-on-one during a protest season. So, yes, I do protest with the chief, and I have to go in there and explain why my property value is not accurate. And now I'm an appraiser. I can easily do that. But for those other properties, mass appraisal makes my property value way higher than it needs to be. So, like, for instance, I think this year, the smaller houses in my neighborhood are selling between $215,000 and $250,000. And so that jumped my appraisal to almost $400,000. I don't live in a $400,000 neighborhood. Like, you're just not going to get that. You're not going to command it. So while it works most of the time, mass appraisal, and like my neighborhood, I still have to protest because my property isn't worth what doing a universe of properties is implying.
Right.
What about you, Nick? Have you ever protested before on yours?
Yeah, well, actually, I have. I've protested a lot of properties because I didn't start working for the appraisal district. I've worked as a consultant and as an analyst. So my background is a lot of commercial property analytics for the most part. I have done some protest at HCAD, which is a little bit different animal. But yeah, there's a lot that goes into it on that side. But it's exactly like Crystal said. I mean, it's kind of, you got to go find out the specifics for your property. And I don't live in Galveston County, so I don't have to go necessarily talk to Tommy about
It's
my
intimidating
value,
when you walk in your boss's office and be like, hey,
yeah,
so.
I think everybody can relate to like going and asking for a raise. It's kind of the same conversation almost. So you think of that uncomfortable feeling you have. That's really what we have.
Right. When I'm responsible, like as appraisers, we're responsible for setting those values. Oh, by the way, mine's wrong. So it seems a little hypocritical, but it's not a perfect process.
Well, if my entire staff came in and said that, it's like, well, maybe we should redo this, rethink the way that we're doing this process. If my staff feels like they're paying too much taxes too, maybe everybody feels the same way, or maybe they are.
Yeah, and it's just you have to have that knowledge to know what you're looking at to decide whether you need a protest or not. And in my case, I know the market very well.
Yeah.
And so I know I need to protest because mass appraisal didn't work perfectly on my home.
Yes. Nick, what'd you go to school for?
I studied communications actually at UH, and so that's you kind of in this business you sort of get into it because of somebody that's in it or somebody kind of pushes you towards it. So when I was in college, I was just working as an intern for my uncle is a property tax consultant, and so I was working with him, and that's how I kind of got into it. And after I kind of graduated from college, I said, I kind of want to get the other side of this. I don't really know what I want to do, so I thought about going to HCAD, and they kind of got a big operation up there, and I felt like there was more opportunity to come down here to Galveston, and I grew up on this side of town. Sort of in the Pasadena Clear Lake area, so this was a lot closer to home, and I had a lot of friends that lived down here, and so I kind of took that knowledge I knew as a consultant and came over to this side, and this is kind of where my true worlds have sort of come together with the appraisal side and the communication side to try to bring that together to better serve the appraisal district and the community. So
I like whenever people they went to school for something and they were passionate and interested in it, and then they actually get to do it, because a lot of times that's not the case, where it's like, well, I went to school for, English, and I'm in insurance, or whatever else.
Yeah.
Right?
I don't think there's any 5-year-olds at career day saying I want to be a property tax appraiser. I don't think that happens. We all kind of just end up here. I love my job. I love being an appraiser, but no, I can't say that it was ever anyone's aspiration to.
No, I don't think so.
I don't think so either. I mean, I went to school for nursing, so I'm now the deputy chief of Galveston County Appraisal District. Like that doesn't seem to fit, but yeah.
That's
one of the guys I was talking to the other day is a consultant. He studied at UT as a music teacher. Yeah. He was a music teacher. Yeah. So people from all walks of life, and it's interesting how people get into it.
Well, they don't teach. Maybe more people would want to be property tax assessors if they taught it in school. Probably not.
Civics. I mean, I think it's like I didn't get civics when I was in school. I mean, I just had interest in the government in general. Somehow my little group of friends that I went to high school with, all of us worked for different government entities, so it just kind of worked out that way.
It's interesting, isn't it? Yeah.
But yeah, so that's for me. That's really got me interested in it, and glutton for punishment. So I've gone back and now trying to get a master's in public administration. So Crystal likes to wheel me out when people have questions about mud districts and PIDs and government finance.
He's a wealth of information. I mean, from the communications background to, the different things that he's done.
Yeah, and talking about people have questions, they can email us. And, Crystal and I are happy to talk to people. I mean, if you got something you want to talk to us about and you got a question, you just got to get answered, send us an email, come down to the office. I mean, we're happy to talk with you.
And I know it sounds cliche, and we were laughing kind of about this earlier because we are a, political subdivision of the state. But we are here to help y'all. I mean, we are here to get you the information. It may not be in the way where I can help you lower your value, because it may not work out that way. But I want to help you understand, and that's the big thing that Nick and I are big proponents of, is that we want to
the help me help you,
me help you, and ask questions.
Yeah, understand the way it works, and this is how we came up with this value. It's not just random. There's a method to it,
right?
And this is what you would need to bring and show us, and we can adjust it if it makes sense or if that's the appropriate value.
Right.
So, cool. So I know, what's the way people can contact one more time? Email. How can they find out more information and follow you guys?
We have a primary email address. Just general questions can be sent there. gcad@galvestoncad.org. If you have more like communications type questions, or you have questions about what we're doing in the public, you want to provide feedback on that, you can email the communications department, which is just communications@galvestoncad.org. Both Crystal and I monitor the email address, so that's a quick way to get a hold of us. And then also right now on our Facebook page, we have a survey out there. So talking about the appraisal and appeal courses that we were talking about earlier, That survey takes about 2 minutes, and you can actually go through the entire thing and never have to type anything. I mean, you just check boxes all the way down. It does give you the option, if you want to give us feedback, you can do that. I mean, just ask some general knowledge stuff. So what can we help with? Where would you like us to focus our efforts? Is it on how we appraise properties? Is it on sort of the civics that go with the appraisal of property? Do you want to know more about the state's role in it? Where can we sort of
fill those holes?
Yeah. And that's where we'd ultimately like to, do an event. We go to Friendswood, and Friendswood has questions about appraisal. We come down to Texas City, Lamarck area, and they have questions about the civics of it. We can focus our tailor our messaging to, address the concerns that people have. And the only way we can do that is if we get people's feedback. Right. So we're looking to get and that's going to continue to run at least through the end of the year, and trying to get as much response as we can to determine sort of where to allocate our resources.
Awesome. Is there anything else that we haven't talked about, or y'all want to talk about it, or just remind people one more time?
I think you've done a really good job of kind of covering the whole
enchilada here.
Yeah,
we did get to talk about a lot. But yeah, you can go back, and if you're just joining us right now, we're streaming live on Facebook, YouTube, and KHEARadio.com, 99.5 FM. You can go back and watch all of this on our Facebook page or YouTube. The video, you can go back to the beginning, listen to the whole thing. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to them as gcad@galvestoncad.org. You can also email them directly, communications@galvestoncad.org. And I appreciate you guys making some time.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us. We'll have to stop back by and visit with you again.
Definitely. It was fun, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was.
It's a good time.
This is KHEA